When we first meet the engineers in Prometheus, their intentions toward humanity are anything but friendly. The human crew who journeyed light years to find their creators are met with a swift and violent response. This leaves one central question hanging in the air. Why do the engineers, our supposed creators, harbor such hostility toward humanity? To uncover the reasons behind their aggression, we need to look beyond what the film explicitly shows us. One of the most plausible explanations comes directly from Ridley Scott himself. In interviews, Scott revealed that the engineers were not always hostile. In fact, they were originally quite fond of humanity. According to Scott, the engineers viewed themselves as the gardeners of space, traveling to distant planets to plant the seeds of life. They nurtured and cultivated life across the galaxy, seeing themselves as cosmic caretakers. Earth was just one of their many projects, a place where they had carefully guided the development of the human species. But as time passed, their perspective shifted. What had begun as a hopeful experiment, full of promise, gradually turned into something far more grim. They began to see humanity as a failed experiment, violent, destructive, and incapable of living up to their lofty expectations. The breaking point for the engineers seems to have occurred roughly 2,000 years ago, during the height of the Roman Empire. The period marks a significant turning point in humanity's relationship with its creators. Scott suggests that the engineers, in a final attempt to guide humanity down a more enlightened path, sent an emissary to Earth, someone we might interpret as a Christ-like figure. This emissary was meant to teach humanity the values of peace, compassion, and wisdom. However, instead of embracing this emissary, humanity rejected and ultimately crucified him. This act of violence against the very being sent to help us marked the moment when the engineers decided that humanity was beyond saving. This theory positions the engineers as deeply disappointed parents, watching their creation spiral into chaos and bloodshed. To them, the crucifixion of this emissary was not just a rejection of their guidance, but an act of betrayal. Humanity, in their eyes, had proven itself incapable of redemption. In response, the engineers began to prepare a final solution: the eradication of the human race. The star map that led the crew of the Prometheus to LV-223, that wasn't an invitation. It was a roadmap to our destruction. But there's another layer to this story that suggests the engineers' hatred for humanity may not be as unanimous as it first appears. Some theories propose that the engineers are not a monolithic group. Instead, they may be divided into two factions, one devoted to creation and the other committed to destruction. The creators see themselves as the architects of life, spreading it throughout the universe. The destroyers, however, believe that any life outside of their own species is an abomination. To them, life should not be allowed to evolve freely, and any species that attempts to rise to their level is a threat to their cosmic order. This internal conflict among the engineers could explain why they initially created life on Earth, only to later attempt to annihilate it. Perhaps the creators saw humanity as a promising experiment, a species with the potential to rise to greatness. But over time, the destroyers gained influence, convincing the rest of the engineers that humanity was a danger to the galaxy. This schism may have reached its peak when the destroyers decided that humanity's time had come to an end. One of the most haunting ideas in Prometheus revolves around the engineers' use of the black goo, a mysterious substance capable of transforming and destroying life. Some speculate that the engineers use this bioweapon to test civilizations. When a species reaches a certain level of technological advancement, the engineers unleash the black goo to see if they can withstand its destructive power. If the species can survive the transformation, they are deemed worthy to continue existing. If not, their planet is wiped clean, a cosmic reset. The black goo acts as both a creator and a destroyer, a tool that embodies the engineer's complex relationship with life itself. In this scenario, humanity's development of space travel may have been the catalyst for the engineer's decision to exterminate us. By journeying to LV-223, the Prometheus crew demonstrated that humanity had crossed a line. We had developed the ability to leave our planet, to explore the stars, and potentially to challenge the engineers' dominance in the galaxy. From the engineers' perspective, this was the ultimate transgression. Combined with their already low opinion of humanity's violent tendencies, our arrival on LV-223 may have been the final straw. The engineers may have seen us not just as a failed experiment, but as a threat that needed to be neutralized. But there's also a more personal aspect to the engineers' hatred for humanity, one that plays out in the final moments of Prometheus. David, the synthetic android created by the human crew, plays a pivotal role in the last encounter between the last engineer and humanity. When the engineer first awakens, he seems calm, almost curious. He surveys the room with a detached interest, perhaps wondering why these creatures had come so far to find him. But when he lays eyes on David, his curiosity turns to rage. The engineer attacks David with sudden and violent force, ripping his head from his body without hesitation. Why does the sight of David provoke such an extreme reaction? One theory suggests that the engineer is disgusted by the sight of a non-biological creation. In the engineer's worldview, the act of creating life is a sacred, god-like power, one that only they are entitled to wield. By creating David, humanity had crossed yet another line. We had not only developed space travel, but we had also dared to play God ourselves. David, as an artificial life form, represents humanity's attempt to replicate the divine act of creation. To the engineer, this is an unforgivable sin. His violent response to David is not just an attack on the android, it's a symbolic rejection of humanity's hubris. Ridley Scott's explanation, coupled with these theories, paints a picture of a species that is both godlike and deeply flawed. The engineers are creators, but they are also destroyers, willing to obliterate their creations when they fall short of perfection. In many ways, their relationship with humanity mirrors the myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied the gods to give fire to mankind. Just as the gods punished Prometheus for his rebellion, the engineers seek to punish humanity for what they see as our transgressions. This brings us back to the central theme of Prometheus: creation and its consequences. The engineers' hatred for humanity is not born out of jealousy or fear, but out of disappointment. We are their creation, but in their eyes, we've strayed too far from the path they intended. The violence, the greed, the destruction, these are not the traits the engineers had hoped to cultivate. They see us as a species that has failed to live up to its potential, and now they want to start over. But beneath their disappointment lies something more complex. The engineers' decision to wipe out humanity may also be rooted in a fear of what we could become. As we continue to evolve, as we develop new technologies and push the boundaries of science, we may one day surpass the engineers themselves. This, perhaps, is the ultimate reason for their hatred. It's not just that we failed, it's that we might succeed in ways they cannot control. The tragedy of the engineers is that they are both creators and destroyers, bound by their own vision of perfection. Their hatred for humanity is a reflection of their own flaws, their inability to accept the imperfections of life. In trying to shape the universe in their image, they have become trapped in a cycle of creation and destruction, unable to break free from the very forces they sought to control. In the end, the engineers' hatred for humanity is not just about our failings, but about their own. Their disappointment in us is a mirror of their disappointment in themselves. And as they seek to erase us from existence, they are also erasing the evidence of their own imperfection, their own failure as creators. The star map found across ancient civilizations on Earth is one of the most perplexing mysteries in Prometheus. These maps, scattered across various cultures that had no contact with one another, led the crew of the Prometheus to the distant moon of LV-223. It seems as though the engineers intentionally left these maps behind, almost as if they wanted humanity to find them. But this raises an unsettling question. Why? If the engineers wanted to destroy us, why would they leave a map leading to their bioweapon facility? One popular theory flips the idea of an invitation on its head. Instead of welcoming humanity to their domain, the star maps could have been warnings. The engineers may have left these maps to signal where they were, not to invite us, but to warn us of the consequences of going too far. The maps lead to LV-223, a moon that houses their deadliest creation, the black goo. This bioweapon, capable of transforming life into horrifying monstrosities, may have been their way of showing early civilizations what awaits those who overreach. Perhaps, through these maps, the engineers were saying, "This is what awaits you if you stray too far." It's possible the engineers didn't expect humanity to progress so quickly. They may have assumed that humans would take much longer to develop space travel and find their way to LV-223. The star maps could have been part of a future test, designed for when humanity reached a certain level of technological sophistication. In this scenario, the engineers were waiting for us to make the journey on our own. When we finally did, it wasn't necessarily out of curiosity or to foster collaboration. It was a way to measure whether we were ready to join them among the stars. Unfortunately, from their perspective, we failed that test. The religious undertones in Prometheus offer another layer to this mystery. The engineers, often likened to gods, interact with humanity in ways that echo divine judgment. In many ways, the moon LV-223, with its eerie temples and deadly bioweapons, resembles the concept of Armageddon, a place where humanity faces its final reckoning. The star map may not have been an invitation at all. Instead, it could have been a harbinger of doom. The engineers may have been watching humanity all along, observing whether we would evolve into a species worthy of survival, or if we would ultimately fall victim to our own hubris and self-destruction. When the time came, they were ready to decide our fate. Adding to the mystery is the architectural design of LV-223 itself. The temple structures found on the moon resemble towering mountains with their jagged peaks and foreboding walls. This design could be a direct reference to the myth of Prometheus, who was punished by the gods and chained to a mountain for giving fire to humanity. In this sense, the engineers are playing the role of the gods, punishing humanity for overstepping its bounds, whether through technological advancements, the creation of artificial life, or the rejection of the engineer's guidance. The architecture of LV-223, particularly the imposing temple structures, also evokes a sense of timelessness and isolation. These temples, filled with ancient artifacts and biological weaponry, could be seen as both a warning and a testament to the engineer's destructive capabilities. The sterile, almost clinical nature of the environment stands in stark contrast to the organic, transformative nature of the black goo. This juxtaposition between the engineers' highly advanced technology and their primal, almost spiritual use of the black goo adds another layer of complexity to their relationship with humanity. The discovery of these star maps across different cultures and time periods adds even more intrigue to the mystery. How is it possible that civilizations separated by thousands of miles and centuries all depicted the same star system? The most logical explanation is that the engineers made regular visits to Earth, seeding life and monitoring its progress. These visits left an indelible mark on human history, inspiring myths, religious stories, and even entire belief systems that were passed down through generations. The star maps themselves may have been created by early humans as a way of recording these encounters, though they likely did not fully understand the true purpose behind them. In this sense, the maps could represent humanity's incomplete grasp of the greater cosmic forces at play. The similarities between the star maps and real-world ancient astronaut theories are striking. These theories suggest that extraterrestrial beings visited Earth in the distant past, influencing the development of human civilization. In the context of Prometheus, the engineers are depicted as these ancient visitors, guiding early humans and leaving behind clues to their existence. The star maps could have been part of a larger plan to test humanity's progress over millennia, waiting for the moment when we would be able to follow the trail they left behind. Whether this test was meant to lead to our salvation or destruction remains unclear. It's also important to consider the possibility that the engineers were not a monolithic race with a unified purpose. Perhaps there were factions among the engineers, some who wanted to nurture humanity, and others who saw us as a threat to their own existence. This internal conflict could explain why the engineers both created and attempted to destroy life on Earth. The star maps in this case might represent the actions of a rogue faction of engineers attempting to guide humanity toward their ultimate goal, while another faction sought to wipe us out before we became too powerful. The concept of LV-223 as a testing ground also raises fascinating questions about the engineers' ultimate plan for humanity. Could it be that the journey to LV-223 was not intended to be an invitation, but rather a final test of whether humanity was worthy of ascending to the engineer's level? If so, the black goo might have been the ultimate trial, designed to test our resilience, intelligence, and ability to adapt. The engineers may have watched from afar, waiting to see how we would handle the horrors unleashed by the goo. If humanity survived, perhaps we would have been invited to join them. But if we failed, as the Prometheus crew did, the engineers would deem us unworthy and prepare to start over. The religious and mythological parallels in Prometheus further enrich the symbolism of the star maps. The engineers' relationship with humanity mirrors stories of gods guiding and punishing their creations. Just as gods in ancient myths would test humanity's worthiness, the engineers may have left the star maps as a form of divine challenge. The maps point to LV-223, a place of reckoning, where humanity would face the consequences of its actions. In this context, The journey to LV-223 becomes a pilgrimage of sorts, with humanity seeking answers from its creators, only to be met with destruction. Ultimately, the reason the engineers left the map to LV-223 remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries of Prometheus. Whether it was an invitation, a warning, or a cosmic test, one thing is certain. The engineers have been watching us. They've seen our progress, our triumphs, and our failures. And when the time came for humanity to seek out its creators, the engineers were ready to make their final judgment. The star map, whether a symbol of hope or doom, represents the fragile and complex relationship between humanity and its creators, a relationship defined by both wonder and fear, creation and destruction. In the theatrical release of Prometheus, the final encounter between the last surviving engineer and the human crew is a rapid, brutal sequence. The engineer says nothing, allowing his physical response, pure rage and violence, to speak volumes as he attacks without hesitation. This leaves audiences to speculate about what might have been going through his mind. However, a deleted scene from the Blu-ray edition of the film reveals a much more nuanced and detailed version of these events, with an entire conversation unfolding between the engineer, David, and Peter Weyland. This additional dialogue not only illuminates the engineer's mindset, but also deepens our understanding of their complex philosophy, their disdain for humanity, and the underlying themes of creation, mortality, and hubris that drive the narrative. The deleted scene begins with Weyland instructing David to communicate with the engineer using an ancient language that David had been practicing throughout the film. As David begins to speak, the engineer listens intently. Unlike the cold and immediate violence of the theatrical release, this engineer appears almost calm, curious about the humans who have ventured so far to find him. His first question to David is simple yet profound. Why have you come? David translates this for Weyland, whose answer encapsulates one of the central themes of the alien universe, humanity's obsession with transcending its limitations. Weyland, a dying man on the brink of death, reveals his reason for seeking the engineer. He has come to ask for more life. His request echoes themes from another Ridley Scott film, Blade Runner, where the android Roy Batty similarly sought more life from his creator, only to be denied. Weyland's request for immortality is not merely personal. It represents humanity's broader struggle with its own mortality and the desire to overcome the natural limitations imposed by life and death. In Weyland's eyes, as the creator of David, a synthetic being, he believes he deserves to live forever, as though his role as a creator places him on par with the engineers themselves. However, the engineer's response is far from what Weyland hoped. According to the deleted scene, the engineer asks why humanity believes it deserves eternal life. Weyland's speech, a bold declaration of his own greatness, is met with cold indifference. The engineer listens, but ultimately he rejects Weyland's plea outright. This refusal to grant immortality is deeply significant, as it ties directly into one of the core themes of Prometheus, the engineer's belief in the natural cycle of life and death. For the engineers, creation comes at a cost, and their philosophy is rooted in the acceptance of this fundamental truth. As seen in the opening scene of the film, one of the engineers sacrifices himself to seed life on a planet, willingly disintegrating to release his DNA into the environment. This act of self-sacrifice is central to their understanding of creation. Life cannot exist without death. The cycle must continue. Wayland's desire to live forever goes against this natural order, and in the engineer's eyes, it is an affront to the very principles of life. Wayland's arrogance, his refusal to accept the inevitability of death, mirrors the very flaws that led the engineers to lose faith in humanity in the first place. In rejecting Wayland, the engineer is not simply denying one man's quest for immortality. He is rejecting humanity's overreaching ambition. Humans, in the eyes of the engineers, have strayed too far from the natural order. We have developed technology that allows us to manipulate life itself, creating synthetic beings like David. And in doing so, we have attempted to play God. The engineers see this as a transgression, a violation of the boundaries that separate creators from their creations. By asking for more life, Wayland reinforces this belief. He is not satisfied with the life he has been given and believes that his ability to create grants him the right to transcend death. The engineers, however, see this as the ultimate flaw in humanity's character, the refusal to accept limitations. The deleted dialogue also offers a deeper understanding of the engineer's reaction to David. Initially, the engineer appears intrigued by the synthetic android, observing him with a kind of detached curiosity. However, this curiosity quickly turns to disgust when he realizes that David is an artificial being created by humans. In the engineer's eyes, humanity's attempt to create life in their own image is not an achievement, but a transgression. The engineer's violent response to David, ripping off his head with brute force, is not just an attack on the android, but a symbolic rejection of humanity's hubris. David represents the pinnacle of human technological advancement, and in destroying him, the engineer is making a clear statement: humanity has crossed a line. This scene also ties into the broader religious and mythological allegories woven throughout Prometheus. Much like gods in ancient myths, the engineers possess the power to create life, but they also bear the responsibility of ensuring that life follows the correct path. When their creations stray too far from the intended course, whether through violence, greed, or the desire for immortality, the engineers step in to correct the error. In the case of humanity, the engineers have deemed us a failed experiment, unworthy of the gifts we have been given. The engineer's decision to destroy the human crew is a reflection of this divine judgment. In his eyes, humanity has become corrupted and no longer deserves to exist. The deleted scene also offers a more detailed look at Peter Wayland's character, revealing the full extent of his arrogance and desperation. Throughout the film, Wayland is portrayed as a man obsessed with his legacy and his desire to cheat death. His decision to bring David with him to meet the engineers is a reflection of his belief in his own greatness. He sees himself as a god, capable of creating life and therefore deserving of eternal life. However, this scene shows the tragic flaw in Wayland's character, his inability to recognize that his creations, both human and synthetic, are fundamentally flawed. He views David as a testament to his own brilliance, but the engineers see David as an abomination, a creation that should never have existed. By cutting this scene, the theatrical version of Prometheus leaves much of this deeper meaning unexplored. The final encounter between Wayland and the engineer, as presented in the theatrical cut, is abrupt and brutal, with little explanation for the engineer's sudden rage. However, with the added dialogue from the deleted scene, we see a much clearer picture of the engineers as beings who value the balance of life and death. They are not merely destroyers. They are caretakers of the natural order, ensuring that the cycle of life and death continues as it should. Weyland's request for immortality disrupts this balance, and the engineer's violent response is not just an act of aggression, but a correction. The engineer's refusal to grant Weyland's request for more life also highlights the theme of hubris that runs throughout Prometheus. Much like the myth of Prometheus, who defied the gods to give fire to humanity and was punished for his actions, Weyland's desire to transcend death is seen as an act of defiance against the natural order. The engineers, like the gods of ancient myths, are willing to destroy their creations when they overstep their bounds. This is reflected in the engineers' decision to kill Weyland and the rest of the human crew. They are no longer seen as worthy of life, having defied the very principles that the engineers hold sacred. This added dialogue also enhances the film's exploration of the relationship between creators and their creations. Just as the engineers created humanity only to be disappointed by the result, Weyland created David only to see his creation rejected by the very beings he sought to emulate. This cyclical relationship between creators and creations is central to Prometheus, and the deleted scene offers a more explicit exploration of this theme. The engineers, like Weyland, are ultimately undone by their own creations. Their decision to create humanity and humanity's subsequent decision to create synthetic life sets in motion a chain of events that leads to their downfall. In conclusion, the deleted scene from Prometheus provides crucial insight into the motivations of the engineers and the thematic underpinnings of the film. It deepens our understanding of the engineers as beings who value the natural cycle of life and death, and who are willing to destroy their creations when that balance is threatened. Weyland's request for immortality and the engineer's violent rejection of that request serves as a powerful commentary on humanity's hubris and the dangers of overreaching. By cutting this scene, the theatrical version of Prometheus leaves much of this meaning hidden beneath the surface. However, with the added dialogue, we gain a clearer understanding of the complex relationship between creators and creations and the philosophical questions that lie at the heart of the film. The moon LV-223, where the tragic events of Prometheus unfold, remains far from a forgotten, desolate place in the aftermath of the crew's demise. Long after the death of the engineers and the human explorers, LV-223 becomes a living world shaped by the remnants of both species and, more importantly, by the dangerous effects of the black goo. This mysterious substance, capable of transforming organic matter in terrifying ways, reshapes not only the surface of LV-223, but also its biological future. In the years following the Prometheus expedition, dramatic and unsettling changes begin to take hold on the moon. What was once a barren, rocky, and inhospitable environment begins to transform into something far more dangerous and alive. The black goo, now spilled across the surface and ecosystems of LV-223, begins to alter everything it touches. This mysterious bioweapon, designed to destroy and evolve life forms simultaneously, accelerates growth within the moon's ecosystems. Vegetation, once scarce in the barren landscape, rapidly begins to flourish. What was once a desolate battlefield between humanity and its creators becomes a lush, organic jungle teeming with alien life, both beautiful and terrifying. The ampules of black goo left behind in the engineers' military outpost are scattered into the environment, accelerating the growth of new species and creating what appears to be a thriving, albeit dangerous, ecosystem. Plants, insects, and predatory species alike evolve at an unprecedented rate, introducing alien life forms that seem otherworldly, even by the standards of the engineers' dark technology. As the black goo continues to seep into the soil and the atmosphere, even the moon's climate changes, creating a breathable atmosphere, a once impossible condition for human life. However, this new ecosystem is anything but welcoming. Every life form on LV-223 is now influenced by the mutagenic properties of the black goo, creating organisms that are predatory, rapidly evolving, and hostile. 1 year after the fateful Prometheus mission, a probe is sent to LV-223 to investigate what remains. However, this probe encounters more than anticipated. While the surface of the moon may seem transformed, one element remains unchanged: the engineers. A surviving engineer, still hidden within the depths of the military installation, destroys the probe before it can gather any critical data. This revelation suggests that not all of the engineers were killed during the events of Prometheus. Some may have survived, perhaps in cryosleep, awaiting the return of humans or some other species to continue their dark experiments. This lone engineer, or others like him, could still be observing, waiting for the right moment to either reclaim their lost dominion or unleash another destructive force across the galaxy. Their plans for humanity and the black goo remain uncertain, but their presence continues to cast a shadow over the fate of LV-223. But the story of LV-223 does not end there. In the decades that follow, human expeditions continue to return to the moon, seeking to unlock the secrets of the engineers and the black goo. One such expedition, occurring 86 years after the Prometheus mission, involves a cargo ship that crash lands on LV-223. The crew, initially believing they have neutralized a xenomorph threat during their journey, quickly discover that one of the creatures has survived. This particular xenomorph, having evolved within the moon's altered ecosystem, is far more dangerous and resilient than its predecessors. Alongside the many other alien species that have evolved on LV-223, the xenomorph begins to hunt the surviving crew members, turning the moon into a battleground of survival once again. This event marks a significant escalation of the conflict between humanity and the dark forces that the engineers once controlled. 40 years later, LV-223 becomes the subject of intense interest once again. This time, a human expedition arrives with a different mission to uncover the fate of Peter Weyland and the original Prometheus crew. Led by a documentary crew, this expedition aims to record the lost history of one of humanity's most notorious ventures into space. However, what they find is far more dangerous than anything they could have anticipated. LV-223, now home to not only xenomorphs, but also surviving engineers and even predators, has transformed into a battlefield of galactic proportions. The few surviving engineers, having reawakened from cryosleep or some other form of stasis, are determined to continue their mission of eradicating humanity. At the same time, the xenomorphs and predators wage war over the moon's resources, transforming LV-223 into a chaotic war zone where survival is the only law. This conflict between three deadly species, xenomorphs, predators, and engineers, reveals the true legacy of LV-223. What was once a military outpost for bioweapon development has now become a planet-sized arena for interspecies warfare. The technological remnants of the engineers, combined with the mutagenic effects of the black goo, have turned the moon into a place where evolution runs unchecked, creating a breeding ground for both life and death. Human expeditions, once eager to unlock the secrets of the engineers, now only find themselves caught in the crossfire of ancient battles fought between gods and monsters. One of the most bizarre and fascinating developments in LV-223's history is the fate of the Deacon, the alien creature born from the last surviving engineer at the end of Prometheus. Over the course of more than 100 years, this monstrous being evolves and mutates, growing to an enormous size. By the time later human expeditions arrive, the Deacon has fused with the landscape itself, its massive form now resembling a mountain. This grotesque biomechanical fusion serves as a chilling reminder of the engineer's dark legacy. The Deacon, born from the combination of human and engineer DNA, is a testament to the destructive potential of the black goo. Now part of the moon's terrain, it looms as a monument to the horrors unleashed by the engineer's experiments, a towering symbol of what happens when the lines between creation and destruction are blurred. The black goo's legacy on LV-223 is not limited to biological transformations. The very technology left behind by the engineers has also evolved. Structures that were once dormant or destroyed have become reactivated, seemingly in response to the presence of new life. The temples and military installations scattered across LV-223 have become living organisms themselves, merging with the environment in unpredictable ways. These biomechanical structures now serve as both traps and sanctuaries for the life forms that inhabit the moon, further complicating the already dangerous landscape. As LV-223 transforms from a once dead military outpost into a thriving ecosystem teeming with hostile alien life, it becomes clear that the story of Prometheus did not end with the death of its crew. Instead, the moon has become a living testament to the engineer's dark experiments, a place where life and death, creation and destruction are in constant conflict. The remnants of the engineer's technology, combined with the black goo's mutagenic properties, have created a world that is forever evolving, forever dangerous. LV-223 is no longer just a battlefield. It is a living, breathing monument to the potential and the peril of playing God. The story of LV-223 is far from over. As new life forms continue to evolve, and as humans and other species return to the moon in search of knowledge or conquest, the fate of LV-223 remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that LV-223 will forever be a place where the consequences of creation and destruction are on full display. A place where the legacy of the engineers, the horrors of the black goo, and the dangers of human curiosity collide in ways that will shape the future of the galaxy. Dr. Elizabeth Shaw's journey into the heart of one of the most profound mysteries of the universe began long before the fateful events of Prometheus. From a young age, Shaw harbored a deep fascination with the question of humanity's origins. What compelled her wasn't just scientific curiosity, it was a profound, personal quest that took root in her after a series of tragic and defining life experiences. These moments shaped her into the determined, resilient figure who would stop at nothing to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Shaw was born in 2061 in South Africa, a country defined by a complex intersection of cultures, history, and belief systems. This environment had a profound impact on her worldview, especially in terms of understanding life, death, and the human place in the universe. Raised in an atmosphere of faith and science, Shaw's Christian upbringing provided her with a spiritual lens through which she viewed the mysteries of existence. Her faith, however, was not rigid. Instead, it was a framework that allowed her to ask big questions about the origins of life and the nature of creation. Tragedy struck her early, and these losses further fueled her quest for understanding. Shaw's mother passed away from an unknown illness when she was a child, a wound that left a deep emotional scar. This was followed by the death of her father, who succumbed to Ebola when Shaw was still young. This loss was especially impactful. Shaw's father had been a medical professional devoted to saving lives, and his passing to such a cruel and unforgiving disease was a harsh lesson in the fragility of life. These experiences ignited a fire in Shaw, a need to understand life and death, to find meaning in the apparent chaos of the universe. Shaw's intellectual pursuits naturally gravitated toward archaeology and anthropology, fields that would allow her to explore ancient human civilizations and their understanding of life beyond Earth. She was particularly fascinated by how these civilizations, separated by vast distances in time and geography, seemed to share common stories about gods, creation, and the stars. As she dug deeper, Shaw became convinced that these ancient cultures were not merely inventing myths, but had experienced something tangible, something real that connected them to the cosmos in ways that modern science had yet to explain. Shaw's path took a pivotal turn when she met Charlie Holloway, a fellow archaeologist who shared her interests. Together, they embarked on a groundbreaking series of discoveries that would challenge the very foundations of human history. During an excavation in Africa, Shaw and Holloway discovered a star map etched into the walls of an ancient cave, a map identical to others found across the globe, from the temples of Mesopotamia to the pyramids of Egypt. These maps all pointed to the same location, a distant moon called LV-223. Shaw's excitement was palpable. She believed these maps were evidence of contact between ancient humans and a more advanced species, perhaps even their creators. The belief would come to define her life's work. For Shaw, the star maps were not just archaeological treasures. They were invitations, messages left by beings she believed were the engineers of humanity. Her belief was that these star maps represented an ancient connection between humans and their creators, a signpost left for humanity when it was ready to uncover the truth. She viewed these engineers as benevolent beings, ones who had sparked life on Earth and had, for reasons yet unknown, left humanity to grow on its own. Shaw hoped that by finding these engineers, she would not only unlock the secrets of human origins, but also find answers to her own personal struggles, particularly her inability to have children. To her, the engineers represented the ultimate creators, and through them, she might find solace in understanding her own limitations. One of Shaw's most significant archaeological finds was an urn, far older than any other artifact she had encountered. Unlike other relics, this urn could not be dated by traditional methods. It was inscribed with geometric patterns, far more advanced than the ancient cultures it had supposedly belonged to. Shaw believed the engineers had left these artifacts as markers, perhaps even tools for understanding their power and intentions. The belief grew stronger when she and Holloway uncovered the same star system depicted across multiple ancient civilizations, an anomaly that couldn't be explained by mere coincidence. Shaw's conviction that humanity was not alone in the universe and that the engineers had seeded life across Earth solidified into a personal mission. This mission culminated in her decision to join the Prometheus expedition, a bold venture financed by the Wayland Corporation, which sought to uncover the truth behind the star maps. Despite her faith and the hope she carried into the mission, Shaw was not naive. She knew the risks involved. The journey to meet one's creators was fraught with unknown dangers, and yet she was willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to find the answers she so desperately sought. In Shaw's mind, this wasn't just a scientific endeavor. It was a spiritual pilgrimage, a quest to connect with the beings who had given humanity life. Once aboard the Prometheus, Shaw's intellectual resolve and personal faith were tested at every turn. From the moment the crew landed on LV-223, it became clear that the answers she sought would not come easily. As they explored the eerie and abandoned structures on the moon, the horrifying truth began to unravel. The engineers, far from the benevolent creators she had imagined, harbored destructive intentions toward humanity. The black goo, an unstable biological weapon of mass destruction, was proof of their darker nature. Instead of finding salvation, Shaw was faced with the possibility that humanity had been nothing more than an experiment, one that the engineers were prepared to wipe clean. But Shaw's spirit remained unbroken. When most of the Prometheus crew met tragic ends at the hands of the engineers or the terrifying effects of the black goo, Shaw pushed forward. Her quest for answers became even more personal after the death of Holloway, who succumbed to the effects of the black goo after being exposed to it during their exploration. Shaw's belief that she could find hope in the engineers was shattered, but her determination to understand why they had created humanity and why they sought to destroy it only intensified. At the end of Prometheus, Shaw is left as the sole human survivor, accompanied only by the severed yet still functional head of the android David. Where others might have chosen to return to Earth, broken and disillusioned, Shaw makes a different choice. She resolves to continue her journey, seeking out the engineer home world to demand answers directly from those who created and betrayed humanity. Shaw's faith in the engineers had been destroyed, but her faith in the search for truth remained unshaken. It's this resilience that defines Shaw, her ability to push forward in the face of overwhelming loss and danger. Dr. Shaw's journey did not end on LV-223. She and David, with his complex motivations and dubious morality, set out to continue their search for the engineers' home world, carrying with them the potential for both discovery and destruction. Shaw's belief in creation, in understanding the deeper meaning behind life and death, would guide her through the darkness of the unknown. Though the exact details of her fate remain shrouded in mystery, Shaw's enduring legacy is that of a seeker, someone willing to challenge the gods themselves in the pursuit of knowledge. Her story is a cautionary tale of the dangers that come with seeking answers to the most profound questions in the universe. Shaw's faith in humanity and in the possibility of something greater carried her farther than anyone could have imagined. But it also led her into the heart of darkness, where the line between creator and destroyer blurred into one. One of the most peculiar and mesmerizing moments in Prometheus comes when we witness an engineer, a member of an advanced alien civilization, use a simple flute to activate his massive biomechanical spacecraft. At first glance, this scene seems both anachronistic and perplexing. How could an ancient, almost primitive instrument be the key to controlling such highly sophisticated and advanced technology? The answer lies in the unique way the engineers seamlessly integrate the biological and the mechanical, creating a system of control that is fundamentally different from anything humanity has ever conceived. The flute is not merely a musical instrument in the hands of the engineers. It is a tool that taps into a deeper understanding of the universe. The juggernaut, the colossal ship it activates, is not just a machine in the traditional sense. It is a living organism, bioengineered to respond to specific stimuli, a creation that bridges the gap between organic life and technological innovation. The use of a flute as an activation device speaks to the engineer's unparalleled mastery of bioengineering, where sound, rather than mechanical controls, becomes the key to unlocking and operating their technology. In this case, the flute serves to generate a precise frequency, one that the ship recognizes and responds to. It is a perfect harmony between life and technology. This peculiar moment also reveals something far more profound about the engineer's worldview. The connection between sound and technology taps into an ancient and universal idea. Everything in the cosmos, at its core, is made up of vibrations. Theoretical physics, particularly string theory, supports this notion. According to string theory, the fundamental building blocks of the universe are not particles, as once believed, but rather vibrating strings of energy. Each vibration corresponds to a different type of particle or force in the universe. By using sound to control their ships, the engineers demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of this universal principle, manipulating vibrations to interact with the biological components of their technology. It is as if they are playing the symphony of the universe itself, tuning their technology to the frequencies of creation. What makes the engineers' approach even more fascinating is the fact that their technology is not controlled through brute force or rigid mechanical systems. Instead, it is through subtlety and nuance, through something as ethereal as sound, that they exert their power. The act of playing the flute, producing the precise frequency needed to activate the ship, reflects an understanding that true control over life and the universe does not come from domination, but from working in harmony with the underlying forces of existence. This is an advanced concept, one that humanity, with its reliance on mechanical and digital controls, has yet to fully comprehend. The biological aspect of the engineers' ships is also worth examining in greater detail. These juggernauts, as they are called, are not merely constructed vessels. They are living organisms designed to fuse with their pilots in a way that goes beyond anything humanity has ever imagined. When the engineer takes his place in the pilot's seat, he does not simply press buttons or manipulate levers. Instead, his body merges with the ship itself. The suit he wears, seemingly mechanical at first glance, is in fact bioengineered to interface directly with the ship's organic control systems. This allows the ship to function as an extension of the engineer's own body, blending biological and mechanical elements into one unified entity. It's a concept that redefines our understanding of technology, showing us that for the engineers, the boundary between life and machinery is fluid. This fusion of the engineer with his ship suggests that the Juggernaut is not just a vehicle, but a living organism capable of responding to its environment. When the human crew of the Prometheus first enters the engineer's spacecraft, they observe how the environment around them seems to change in response to their presence. The walls shift subtly, the atmosphere grows denser, and the ship itself almost appears to come alive, reacting to the intrusion of foreign life. This implies that the Juggernaut is not simply a passive object, but an active participant in its surroundings, aware, in some sense, of what is happening within its corridors. The flute, then, becomes the key to awakening this living organism, sending a signal that it is time for the ship to spring into action. The choice of a flute as the activation tool is not arbitrary. It ties deeply into the broader themes of Prometheus and the engineer's philosophy of creation, balance, and destruction. Sound, after all, is one of the purest forms of energy in the universe. It travels through the air as waves of vibration, and these vibrations have the power to affect the physical world in ways that are both subtle and profound. The engineers' reliance on sound to activate their technology is a reflection of their belief in balance and harmony within the universe. Just as the vibrations of the flute bring the ship to life, so too do the engineers strive to maintain equilibrium in their creations. When that balance is disrupted, whether by humanity's creation of artificial life or by its destructive tendencies, the engineers respond with swift and final judgment. In a way, the flute represents the fragility of creation. A delicate instrument producing a gentle sound has the power to control something as vast and formidable as the Juggernaut. It's a reminder that power does not always manifest through brute force. Sometimes the most profound control comes from working in harmony with the forces of the universe. For the engineers, sound is not just a method of control, it is a connection to the very fabric of existence. This method of control, rooted in sound and subtlety, highlights the stark contrast between the engineers' approach to the universe and humanity's. Humans, with their reliance on technology and machinery, often seek to impose their will on the world through force, manipulation, and control. The engineers, on the other hand, understand that true power lies in understanding and working with the natural forces of the universe. By using sound to activate their technology, they are demonstrating their mastery over these forces, showing that they are not merely creators, but also keepers of the natural order. Moreover, the flute speaks to the engineer's connection to ancient wisdom and primal forces. In many human cultures, music and sound have long been believed to hold special powers, capable of healing, summoning spirits, or even influencing the physical world. The engineer's use of sound as a form of control suggests that they, too, understand the power of music and vibration on a fundamental level. This is not merely advanced technology at play. It is a deeply spiritual connection to the rhythms of the universe, a harmony that transcends physical manipulation. The significance of the flute extends beyond the scene itself. It's a symbol of the engineers' profound knowledge and their unique approach to technology, one that blends the organic with the mechanical, the ancient with the advanced. The engineers do not rely on cold, mechanical interfaces to control their creations. Instead, they use something as simple and elegant as a sound to communicate with their living machines. In doing so, they demonstrate a mastery over life and technology that is both awe-inspiring and humbling. Finally, the flute can also be seen as a metaphor for the engineer's philosophy of creation and destruction. Just as a flute can create beautiful music with a single breath, so too can the engineers create life with the slightest touch. But that same breath can also be used to silence the music, to bring an end to what was once alive. The flute, in this sense, represents the duality of the engineer's role as both creators and destroyers. They hold the power to bring life into being, but they also have the power to end it. In conclusion, the use of a flute to control the juggernaut in Prometheus is more than just an intriguing detail. It is a window into the engineer's worldview. It reveals their understanding of the universe as a place of balance, harmony, and vibration, where life and technology are intertwined in ways that defy human understanding. The flute is a symbol of this harmony, a tool that allows the engineers to control their creations through the power of sound, and a reminder that true power lies not in domination, but in working in concert with the forces that shape the universe. The revelation that the engineers were responsible for the creation of humanity is one of the most profound moments in Prometheus. It reframes human existence, suggesting that we are not the product of random evolutionary processes, but rather the deliberate work of an ancient and advanced race. Yet this discovery leads to an even more unsettling and complex question. If the engineers created humanity, then who or what created the engineers? This question lingers throughout Prometheus without a definitive answer, but several theories have emerged to fill in the gaps, each offering a different perspective on the origins of these godlike beings. One of the most compelling and widely discussed theories is that the engineers themselves are the product of an even more ancient and advanced civilization, much in the same way that they seeded life across the cosmos. This idea introduces the concept of an endless cycle of creation, where every species in the universe is the result of another's work. This theory raises profound philosophical questions about the nature of existence and the origins of life. If the engineers were created by a higher power, then who created that power? The notion of an infinite chain of creation, where no species is truly the first, hints at the possibility that the question of origin may never have a concrete answer. It speaks to the human desire to understand the beginnings of life, a quest that may ultimately prove elusive. The engineers in this scenario are both creators and created, part of a recursive process that extends far beyond the limits of human understanding. This theory also fits within the broader themes of Prometheus, which constantly grapples with the nature of creation and the consequences of playing God. Just as humanity is the engineer's creation, so too might the engineers be the creation of a civilization so advanced that its motives and technologies are incomprehensible to us. If this civilization exists, it may have seeded the engineers with the same intentions that the engineers had when they created humanity, continuing the cycle of life, perhaps even as an experiment. The unsettling part of this idea is that creation might not stem from benevolence, but from scientific curiosity or even indifference. We, and by extension the engineers, may be nothing more than part of a cosmic experiment. Our destinies shaped by beings who see us as tools or products, rather than as sentient life deserving of respect or autonomy. Another theory that has gained traction among fans of the Alien franchise is that the engineers themselves were a direct result of the black goo, the mysterious bioengineered substance that plays a central role in both Prometheus and Alien Covenant. In this view, the black goo is far more than a simple bioweapon. It is a form of ancient intelligence, perhaps even alive in some sense, capable of transforming and accelerating the evolution of life. The engineers, according to this theory, evolved from organisms that came into contact with the black goo millions of years ago. Over time, the goo's transformative properties turned these simple organisms into the highly advanced beings we see in Prometheus. This theory presents the black goo not just as a tool of destruction, but also as the very force of creation itself. Its ability to break down and rebuild organisms suggests that it may be the foundation of all life in the alien universe. If the engineers were indeed born from the black goo, it would explain their reverence for the substance, which they store in sacred urns within their temples. For the engineers, the black goo is not just a weapon, it is the source of their own existence. This reverence also explains why the engineers are willing to use the black goo to wipe out other species, including humanity. From their perspective, the goo is a purifier, a tool that can be used to reset the balance of life in the universe. Civilizations that stray too far from the natural order, like humanity, must be erased so that new life can begin. The idea that the engineers originated from the black goo also fits within the broader themes of creation and destruction that permeate Prometheus. If the black goo is responsible for their existence, it makes sense that the engineers would use it to continue the cycle of creation by seeding other worlds, but also to maintain the balance of life by eliminating species that pose a threat. In this way, the black goo becomes both the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega of life in the universe. The engineers, as its stewards, see themselves as responsible for ensuring that life evolves according to a certain plan, one that humanity, in their view, has violated. However, a more controversial and radical theory suggests that the engineers may not be the ultimate creators after all, but rather the creation of the very thing they sought to control, the xenomorphs. This theory arises from a cryptic mural found within the engineered temple on LV-223, which depicts a xenomorph-like figure in a pose that resembles crucifixion. The engineers clearly revere this creature, perhaps even worship it as a deity, suggesting that the xenomorph may have played a significant role in their creation. If this theory is true, it would turn the entire alien mythology on its head. Instead of the engineers being the creators of the xenomorphs themselves might be the progenitors of the engineers. In this scenario, the engineers are not the masters of life and death that they appear to be, but rather caretakers of a more powerful and ancient species. The black goo, which contains elements of xenomorph DNA, would then be part of the engineers' mission to spread their creators' genetic material across the galaxy. The engineers' experiments with the black goo are not acts of creation in their own right, but rather attempts to continue the work of the xenomorphs, spreading their genetic influence across the universe. This theory ties into one of the central themes of Prometheus, the dangers of playing God. Just as humanity sought to create artificial life in the form of David, only to be horrified by the consequences, so too might the engineers have been created by the xenomorphs, only to rebel against their creators. The cycle of creation and destruction repeats itself throughout the Alien franchise, with each species attempting to play God, only to watch their creations spiral out of control. If the xenomorphs did create the engineers, it would explain why the engineers view humanity with such disdain. In their eyes, we are just the latest in a long line of failed creations, beings who, like the engineers themselves, have overreached and disrupted the natural order. The mural depicting the crucified xenomorph adds a layer of religious symbolism to this theory. The xenomorph, in this interpretation, is not just a creature. It is a godlike figure, demanding sacrifice for the continuation of its species. The engineers' willingness to sacrifice themselves, as seen in the opening scene of Prometheus, mirrors this idea of sacrificial creation. Just as the xenomorphs may have sacrificed themselves to create the engineers, so too do the engineers sacrifice themselves to seed life on other planets. This cycle of creation through sacrifice is one of the most recurring motifs in Prometheus, reinforcing the idea that life itself is born out of destruction. Ultimately, whether the engineers were created by a more ancient civilization, the black goo, or the xenomorphs, one thing is clear. They are not the omnipotent gods they appear to be. They are, like humanity, part of a much larger and more complex web of creation and destruction. Their role in the universe is one of both awe and tragedy, a species that sought to control life, only to be undone by the very forces they tried to harness. The question of who created the engineers is not just about their origins, it's about the nature of creation itself. In the universe of Prometheus and Alien, life is not a straightforward process of creation and evolution. It is a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, driven by forces that are far beyond the comprehension of any single species. The engineers' downfall, much like humanity's, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing God. Their attempts to control the very forces that shaped them, whether through their experiments with the black goo or their creation of humanity, ultimately lead to their undoing. It is a reminder that creation is a double-edged sword, one that can bring life but also destroy it, depending on who wields the power. In the end, the question of who created the engineers may never be fully answered. But in asking the question, Prometheus invites us to consider the larger implications of creation, evolution, and the responsibilities that come with wielding the power of life and death. The engineers, like humanity, sought to unlock the secrets of the universe only to discover that some mysteries are best left unsolved. At the heart of Prometheus lies a deep connection to mythology, particularly the ancient archetype of the dying god, a figure who sacrifices himself for the creation or preservation of life. This archetype has appeared across cultures for thousands of years, from the Greek myth of Prometheus to the Egyptian god Osiris, and even in the Christian figure of Jesus Christ. In these stories, the dying god gives up his life to bring something greater into existence, whether it's knowledge, fertility, salvation, or the continuation of life itself. This motif of self-sacrifice is central to Prometheus, woven into its narrative and visual storytelling to explore the complex relationship between creation and destruction. The engineers in Prometheus embody the dying god archetype in a way that resonates with these ancient myths. In the film's opening sequence, we watch as an engineer drinks from a cup filled with the black goo, a mysterious substance that immediately begins to disintegrate his body. His flesh dissolves, and his genetic material spills into a nearby river, where it begins to break down and form the building blocks of new life. This act of self-sacrifice mirrors the myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied the gods to give fire to humanity, only to be punished by being chained to a rock, where an eagle would eat his liver every day for eternity. In Prometheus, the engineers similarly sacrifice themselves for the sake of creation, giving their lives to seed new planets and generate new forms of life. But unlike the myth of Prometheus, in which the act of giving fire to mankind is seen as a heroic defiance, the engineers' actions carry a darker, more ambiguous tone. They are creators, yes, but they are also destroyers. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves to bring life into the universe comes with a cost, one that is revealed as the story unfolds. Creation for the engineers is not a benevolent act. It is something that must be carefully controlled, and when their creations fall short of perfection, they must be destroyed. This duality of creation and destruction is key to understanding the engineers' role in Prometheus. They represent both the light and the dark sides of the creative process, the desire to bring life into being, and the need to wipe it out when it no longer serves its purpose. The theme of the dying god is not limited to the engineer's actions. It also permeates the religious and mythological imagery that runs throughout the film. The engineers, much like gods of ancient myth, have the power to create life, but they also wield the authority to judge it. Their actions echo the story of the Great Flood from the Bible, in which God wipes out humanity to cleanse the earth of sin. In this sense, the engineers are akin to the vengeful God of the Old Testament, willing to destroy their creations when they believe they have fallen too far from the intended path. This idea is further reinforced by Ridley Scott's suggestion that the engineers sent an emissary, a Christ-like figure, to guide humanity in the right direction, only to see him rejected and crucified. This act of violence solidified the engineers' decision to wipe out humanity, much like God's decision to flood the earth after witnessing mankind's corruption. The parallels to the myth of the dying god are evident in the visual symbolism of Prometheus, particularly in the mural found within the engineer temple on LV-223. This mural depicts a figure with its abdomen torn open, a haunting image that evokes the myth of Prometheus after his punishment, or Jesus Christ after his crucifixion. The figure's torn body is a powerful reminder of the costs of creation, a theme that runs throughout the film. In Prometheus, creation is not a simple act. It requires sacrifice, often in the form of death. The engineers, like the dying god of myth, give their own lives to bring about new life. But this act is not purely selfless. There is a sense of cold calculation in their sacrifice, as if they are following a cosmic blueprint that dictates when life should be created and when it should be destroyed. The connection to the dying god archetype also extends to the broader themes of sacrifice and resurrection in Prometheus. The engineers' willingness to sacrifice themselves for the sake of life is admirable, but it is also deeply flawed. They are not benevolent gods. They are creators who demand perfection from their creations, and when they don't get it, they resort to destruction. This is seen most clearly in their relationship with humanity. The engineers created life on Earth, but when they saw that humanity had strayed too far from the path they intended, they decided to wipe the slate clean. In this way, the engineers embody the duality of the dying God. They give life, but they also take it away when it no longer meets their expectations. The mythology of the dying God is also reflected in the film's portrayal of human ambition and the consequences of overreaching. Just as the engineers create life only to destroy it when it disappoints them, humanity has often created technology, societies, and even cultures, only to watch as those creations spiral out of control. In Prometheus, the engineers serve as a reflection of humanity's own struggles with creation. Their attempts to control life mirror humanity's own efforts to harness technology and science for creation, often with unintended and catastrophic consequences. The black goo, for example, is a powerful symbol of the dangers of unchecked creation. It has the potential to create life, but it is also a weapon of destruction, capable of wiping out entire species. The engineers' use of the black goo as both a tool of creation and destruction mirrors humanity's own struggles with technology and the ethical questions that arise when we attempt to play God. This duality of creation and destruction is also evident in the engineers' relationship with David, the synthetic android created by the human crew. David, like the engineers, is both a creator and a destroyer. He seeks to understand the engineers and their power over life, but he also harbors a deep resentment toward humanity for creating him. David's actions throughout the film reflect the same ambiguity that defines the engineers. He is curious about the engineers' ability to create life, but he is also willing to use their technology to further his own ends, regardless of the consequences. In this way, David embodies the same tension between creation and destruction that drives the engineers. He is both fascinated by the power of creation and willing to destroy in order to understand it. The connection to the myth of the dying God reaches its culmination in the film's final act, when Dr. Shaw, the last surviving human, sets out to find the home of the engineers. Like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Shaw is determined to confront the creators and demand answers. Her quest mirrors the mythological theme of humanity's desire for knowledge and the consequences of overreaching. In seeking to understand the origins of life, Shaw is willing to risk everything, even her own life. Her journey is a continuation of the same cycle of creation and destruction that has defined the engineer's actions throughout the film. She is willing to sacrifice herself for the sake of knowledge, just as the engineers sacrifice themselves to create life. Ultimately, Prometheus asks us to consider what it means to be a creator. The engineers, with their godlike power, represent the ultimate creators, but their actions reveal the darker side of creation. Their willingness to destroy life when it no longer meets their expectations forces us to question whether the power to create should come with the responsibility to destroy. The engineer's downfall, much like humanity's, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing God. Creation, as Prometheus shows us, is not a simple act. It is fraught with consequences, and those who seek to wield its power must be prepared to face the destruction that often follows. In the end, The myth of the dying god serves as a powerful lens through which to view the events of Prometheus. The engineers, like the gods of ancient myth, sacrifice themselves to bring life into the universe, but their actions are not without consequences. Their story is one of creation and destruction, of life and death, of gods and mortals, all intertwined in a cosmic dance that has played out across the stars for millennia. The question Prometheus leaves us with is whether humanity, in its quest for knowledge and creation, will follow the same path as the engineers, or whether we will find a way to break the cycle of destruction and forge a new path forward.